Hello, everyone. So this is the second pre-recorded class for 2025 for the membership. And today we have a lot of material to cover, and it's going to be wide-ranging. It's going to ostensibly be about white cloud essential oil, which is commonly referred to as Kunzea essential oil. But it's going to move into a lot of different territories that are very important in this day and age, including the immune system and protective chi, that aspect of vital force that protects you, that's referred to as Wei Chi in Chinese medicine. We will be discussing some various protocols that you can do, some acupoints as well, some other essential oils, some other techniques. So there's a lot of material. So I suggest that you not only watch this once, but if you're really serious about learning material, you watch it more than once. You'll be able, of course, to download this, and you probably already have. And so you can watch as many times as you want. The demo document that I'm going to be working from will be ultimately available up in the member zone. It'll be posted up there as a PDF file. So you can be able to download that as well, and you'll have all the written material so you can read it as well. So with that said, let's just get into it and let's just see where it goes. So here we go. So as you can see here, it says the yin and yang of white cloud essential oil. Now, I will say here that this is a lot more than just about the yin and yang of white cloud essential oil, but you will learn a lot about that understanding of how to approach essential oils from that particular perspective. Let's take a look and let's see where it's going to go. So, of course, everyone has heard of yin and yang, but they're not really quite clear exactly why it's important to even know it. It just seems like something philosophical that you learn and then you let go of. But in Chinese medicine, it is the beginning point, the starting point for every understanding of every technique, every tea blend, every acupoint selection, every context that emerges from the Chinese medicine zone ultimately can be traced back to the principle of yin and yang. So let's review it. So the fundamental polarized force of yin and yang emerges from the single force of the Tao. Now, there are many different names for the Tao according to what philosophy you've studied, what the origin or what country of origin that philosophy is. Some years back in Spiritualis of Essential Oils, we discussed the ancient Greek philosopher Plotinus and his philosophy of the one. So the one and the Tao, in my mind, are essentially, if not the same thing, there's a great deal of congruence between them. So yin and yang underlies all cycles, interactions, and movement and differentiation within the living and non-living phenomena of the natural world. So first you have this one all-pervading force, which is the Tao or the Wei or the One. And this is the origin of life as this one all-pervading force. We can call this spirit, if you like. And from spirit emerges two forces. So from one emerges two, and this is yin and yang. So the yin and yang polarity contains both life force and life information that facilitates the differentiation of the body into its various functional tissues, organs, and systems. So the term information is very important for understanding. So if you go outside and you see trees and you hear birds and you can see flowers blooming in the garden and so forth, and you have to realize it's more than structure. There's information in each of these, all the phenomena of the natural world that enables that plant or that bird to know what to do. How does a rose bush know when to blossom? How do trees know when to put out their leaves? How do birds know when to migrate and when to sing and when to bed down? Well, there's information. And where does this information come from? Well, it ultimately can be traced back to this one all-pervading force that everything emerged from. Now, in quantum physics, the world beyond this world, what they refer to as the non-local dimension, which we can refer to as the one or the Tao or spirit, is populated by light waves. And one of the properties of light waves is that light waves can store information. So all these light waves in the non-local dimension, using quantum physics terminology, have some information. And it's this stored information in the non-local dimension that somehow is transferred into the material world, into this universe, into this dimension, and provides all living creatures, all living beings, all living plants with the understanding of what it needs in order to be able to survive and thrive in this world. So this information is subdivided into yin information and yang information, and we'll see what that means. So the unfolding of the one into the polarity of yin and yang occurs within all plants and all animals, and of course, essential oils. So one of the primary values of the yin and yang model is the elegant simplicity of its practical application. So one of the purposes that I have in continuing to teach is to provide some type of not only an understanding, but an ability to translate that understanding to practical application that can be done by anyone who's really interested in their own homes. So I'm not designing these courses for other professional practitioners, although many of the members and students that I have are professional practitioners, and they can use it in their own way within the context of their own treatment models. But for those people who are just working at home with themselves, their families, their friends, pets, and so forth, you have to know, well, what do I do with this information? And that's the practical application. In order to be able to move from content to process in some type of a way that has value, you have to make it simple. There has to be an elegant simplicity to it. And the yin and yang model provides that. One of the issues that you will find, not only in Western medicine, but in many of the practices of Chinese medicine, is that it's symptom-based. In other words, if let's go back to Chinese medicine. If there's a specific acupoint, there's a list of 50 different symptoms that you would use it for. Or if you take a symptom, say headache, migraine headache, or nosebleed, and then there's 20 different points, and you don't know why those points are being selected in any way. And if you go to Western medicine, it's all symptoms. Oh, you have this symptom, you have that symptom, and then you got to remember what you do for those symptoms, and nobody can remember all of that. But if you can remember patterns, of imbalance, rather than every thread in the fabric, if you just remember the fabric as a pattern, of patterns of imbalance and dysregulation. In other words, in order for the trillions of cells in the body to be able to function in some type of an organized way, there has to be regulation of all those cells. Something has to regulate it. And in the state of health, there is a state of regulation in the body. In a state of lack of health, of disease, there's a state of dysregulation where things are not being regulated properly, and there's recklessness of action in the body by the various forces and activities in the body, and chaos. And this is part of a chronic disease picture. So the yin-yang model not only helps you to understand your pattern of imbalance and dysregulation, it helps you determine, well, what do I do? What's my relevant therapeutic response? So the key to using the yin and yang model is in an effective manner, is to be able to match the pattern of its manifestation. Okay, is it yin? Is it yang? Is it what's the balance and so forth in someone's integrated constitutional and symptom picture, root and branches picture? What does that mean? Root and branches picture. Well, you have a deep case and you have some type of a superficial case that's going on at the moment. So let's say right now you're suffering from some type of low back pain and you're having a urinary infection, your digestion is off, you're not sleeping well. Those are branches. Those are just branches. Branches of what? Branches of the root. The root disorder, what's going on? And this root disorder is the combination of what you brought into this world constitutionally, what your genetics and what your previous life information that was carried forward into this incarnation, what happened during the period that you were a fetus in utero, what happened in the first few years of childhood. That's your constitution. And then you've had this whole life history that created this constitutional and deep root picture. And the branches grow out of those roots. So the symptoms that you have now are not just like a lightning strike in a clear blue sky. They are something that grows out of a soil that has already been composted over the course of your entire lifetime. So when you are trying to understand your case, you have to understand both the branches and the root. And when you are treating the branches, which you have to, because a person is suffering and you have to ameliorate their suffering, their pain and discomfort, you should be choosing essential oils and herbs and acupoints and so forth that not only somehow treat the branch and relieve whatever discomfort that branch is presenting with in the moment, but somehow will not only reveal some glimpse of the root, but will tie back to the root. So an effective treatment of the branch or understanding of the branch will reveal to you a greater understanding of the root. And by doing so, you'll be treating some aspect of the root as well. Because if you don't downgrade the influence of a root that is dysregulating and is causing problems here in the current, then you're just going to present with something else. And you're going to find yourself doing what most people in the Western society who are getting older do, which is play whack-a-mole. They present with one branch, they go to the medical doctor, he gives them a drug which squashes or represses or suppresses that branch. It pushes that presentation, that manifestation, that expression of the root back downward, which then magnifies the dysfunction of the root. And the root then presents with a different symptom that is not being suppressed. And you try to whack that down as well. And what you end up with is 5, 9, 12 different prescription medications, all of which have side effects that interact with each other. And now you have a drug disease built on top of an organic disease. And then it becomes very difficult to treat. So we all know that, or hopefully you know, that spiritual phytoessencing is a synthesis of certain aspects of the doctrine of signatures, which we're going to see in just a few minutes, Western anatomy and physiology, Chinese medicine, anthroposophical science, and you're going to be seeing quite a bit of that in this recording as well, aromatherapy, herbal medicine, classical homeopathy, Kabbalah, philosophy, depth psychology, which you'll see some depth psychology here today as well, gemstone healing, and color therapy. Now, in terms of white cloud essential oil, the chapter for this, for the Materia Medica Spiritualis, will be done in a month or two. And I will just mention to you, for those of you who are interested, what is the gemstone association for white cloud essential oil? It's Tanzanite, the gemstone Tanzanite, if you're interested in that. So let's take a look now at, let's move up to white cloud essential oil. So first we see one of the two pictures I've put in this document about white cloud. It's fairly easy to tell why it's called white cloud. As you can see, the flowers have some resemblance to clouds. So let's move down. Let's find out some things about the essential oil and the plant itself. So the genus and species, the Latin genus and species for white cloud is Kunzea ambigua. Ambigua. So as soon as you hear that, without knowing anything else about this plant and the oil and so forth, you should be saying in your mind, ambigua. How can I use that? Ambiguous. How can I use that? What does that bring to mind? So it's commonly known as white cloud or white kunzea or poverty bush or tick bush. And tick bush is one of the other important common names that we should know. Now, see, I've highlighted certain aspects of the text in here, and there's reasons for that as to why I highlight it. So when you're reading through this on your own, the highlighting is going to help you. It's going to bring your eye to certain things that will key you into your understanding of the oil. So it's a wild plant that occurs primarily on, and this is, pay close attention, sandy soils. So what's a sandy soil? A sandy soil has low moisture, as opposed to one of the, a soil that has a lot of clay in it, which would be very moist soil. And it occurs in coastal or near coastal regions. So the first thing you think about, coastal, near coastal, what is that telling me? Signatures, water, some proximity to water. It's not in the water, it's not exactly on the water, but it's near the water. So water somehow is interfacing with dryness and water. So we have the dry aspect and we have the water element aspect of Tasmania and Eastern Australia. So it's Australia is where this is indigenous to. And it's a small to medium-sized spreading shrub that can attain, or it's a small tree as well, that can attain a height and width of about 16 feet, but it's usually much smaller. So it's very common. It's a very common dry forest shrub. Here we go again, back to the dryness. But then on the other hand, it mentions something here that's going to come in importantly as we move on. It regenerates in disturbed areas, places that have been trampled on by human activity or a fire. Something has damaged the area or disturbed it in some way. And what comes back in first? What is one of the primary repopulating plants of a disturbed area will be white cloud. And you'll find out why in a while, why that's important. So it is killed by fire, as most plants are, but it can regenerate from seed. So it has this regenerative capacity. If there are seeds in the area, it will regenerate. Now, in the soil, it will regenerate. So it has the ability to regenerate. Plants will also colonize unburned sites. So they'll colonize. They have this ability not only to spread, and just to reveal a little bit of what's coming, this tells us this is the animal side of it. It spreads, it's territorial, it'll move. Just like if you read ancient history, these peoples invaded this land, and then they were the ones that ruled the plains in East Asia in 2,000 years ago, and then they were invaded by some other invading tribe. So there's always this colonization going on in the ancient history of peoples moving here and peoples moving there and colonizing sites and taking over sites, this territoriality, this spreading behavior that's common to animals or human beings being animals. And so you will see this plant has this animal quality of colonizing various sites, of moving, of migrating and taking over. But what does it need in order to do that? It needs adequate sunlight. So here we have the connection. In order to do this, it needs light. It needs brightness. And what is brightness? Brightness is yang. Brightness is yang and darkness is yin. Again, all of these things will come together. You do not have to remember each of these various types of interpretations that I'm mentioning now. You'll see how it all comes together. It's a hardy and adaptable plant. Hardiness, adaptability. Here, once again, we're going back to this feeling that it has some type of animal energy, which in anthroposophical medicine is called the astral body, or in Kabbalah is referred to as the animal soul. So the animal that has a strong animal soul component. Now, plants are yin, animals are yang, because plants are stationary, they're more passive, and animals are move around a lot, and they're more aggressive. So that's yang. Stationary, more passive, that's more yin. But as we see here, there's this overlap. The yin creates yang, and yang creates yin, and yin is within yang, and yang is within yin. The ability to regenerate is a yin quality because all the substance of the body, all the tissues of the body, include all the cells that reproduce other cells, that's all yin. So regeneration is a yin quality. But in order to regenerate in a disturbed area, it has to be moved there. It needs some action. It needs some yang in order to facilitate the yin. So it's a hardy and adaptable plant, which tells you it has this sort of yang animal quality. That's used in windbreaks. In other words, it can resist. It has a resisting power. The old-time naturopaths, old-school naturopaths, refer to immunological action as basically two things: resisting power and recovery power, the ability to resist and the ability to recover. So, what do we have in this one paragraph? It has the ability to resist, resisting power, like cloud, and it has the ability to recover, to regenerate in disturbed areas, to regenerate from seed when the plant has been killed by fire. Recovery power, resisting power. This begins to tell you that white cloud, through the signatures, tell you this is a very powerful immune system plant, oil, I should say. It's also used to stabilize sand dunes. So sand dunes will erode. They don't have a lot of moisture. The wind comes and it basically will start blowing away a lot of the sand, and this could cause problems of various kinds, especially if there are houses around or that type of thing. And so what do we have here? We have the dryness, which is going to be yang, and we have the stabilization, which is going to be yin. It lends substance to something that would move and blow away. Now, moving to the flowers, they're white and they're sweetly fragrant. Now, if you have no experience with white cloud essential oils, I suggest you get some. It's a beautiful oil. It's really a lovely scent. Lovely, very difficult to describe. I would say it's in the helichrysum kind of scent. It doesn't have a scent that's reminiscent of helichrysum in any way, but it's that kind of zone in terms of its scent, or inula graveolens, in that kind of zone. Now, here's an important thing. The flower stamens are longer than its petals. Let's go back to the picture here again now. Here's the picture. See all of these projections that are poking out of the plant like antenna? Those are the stamens. Flowers are the sexual organ of the plant. Plants reproduce by creating seeds within the flower. So the actual production of the seed itself, the development, cultivation of the seed, is the female organ of the plant. But what fertilizes that seed and leads to its development and so forth is the pollens that we have, or from the stamens. So the center of the flower will have something called a pistil, P-I-S-T-I-L, which is the female part. And then you have the stamens, which is the male part. And then there's this sexual reproductive type of activity that creates the seed. So in this case, the fact that the stamens are longer, as it says here, longer than its petals, tells you that there's a male quality, a dominant masculine, more male quality. And once again, this brings us back to the yang. Yang is male is yang, I should say. And the female aspect would be yin. And again, it's called white cloud due to the cloud-like appearance of its white blossoms. Now we move on to this next section. So the insects are the main pollinators, including various types of beetles and butterflies and bees and wasps. And the species also provides shelter for small birds and an animal called the long-nosed bandicoot, which is indigenous to Australia. So what does this tell you? All of these things bring their animal energy to the flower, to the plant. So there's this transference of astral body energy, of animal soul energy from beetles and butterflies and flies and bees and wasps and long-nosed bandicoots and so forth and birds to the plant, which will then collect them and harbor them and concentrate them in its own manifestation. Remember, yang pervades yin and yin pervades yang, as we will see. It's been described anecdotally as a bush, meaning the white cloud plant, under which indigenous animals sleep to seek refuge from biting insects, including ticks and mice. So what do we see in this? Well, the animals seek refuge, protection. What is protection in human terms? Immune system. This tells you something. Well, animals seek the plant for protection. Can this oil help protect me? So the animals are seeking protection from insects, from biting insects, including ticks and mites. Hence the appellation, the name, tick bush. So the Australians refer to it as tick bush. And white cloud has also been used by farmers in the outback to control tick infestation of their cattle. Paradoxically, it is used in native gardening to attract native pollinating insects. So it has this ability to attract insects as well, but the pollinating insects, not the ones that are going to cause disease so much. They may be annoying, but not going to cause disease in human beings to the way that ticks and mites, or animals, the way that ticks and mites might. But the whole concept of attraction and repulsion is an animal soul quality. an astral soul. So it has that animal soul attraction repulsion quality going on. The repulsion being of the ticks, the attraction being of the pollinating insects. So the question that may come to some of your minds as soon as you hear that is, would this be an oil that I should consider in blends for Lyme disease? Because it's a major problem here in the US. I'm not sure if it occurs in other countries in the world. I haven't really looked into that. But especially in the East Coast and in the Midwest of the US, this is becoming a really major problem. And for some people, it's a life destroying type of problem. The pain, the fatigue seem to be inconquerable. And the antibiotics, because it's caused by a bacterial infection, the genus being Borrelia. It's caused by a bacterial infection that's transferred to humans by a tick bite. And it becomes a chronic disease. And the antibiotics that the medical doctors use to treat it, sometimes it works, and a lot of times it doesn't. It's incomplete in its action, and some of the invading bacteria survive and then multiply once again. And as with any antibiotics, they can cause problems over time, or they become less effective over time as well. And then the person is stuck with a chronic disorder that they don't have any real solutions to. So you have to look for other solutions. Now, my goal here today is not to discuss Lyme disease to any great extent, but I will say that in my mind, this is enough for me to hear that animals seek refuge from biting insects, including ticks, that this repels ticks is enough to tell me there's enough association with ticks, even though in the literature, it's not mentioned in relation to Lyme disease. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it's an Australian oil, and I'm not sure if there is Lyme disease in Australia. I haven't really looked into it. So I don't know. So maybe that's why it's not in there. It's certainly, the oil is certainly been discovered to have value for various other types of bacteria. So I would say yes. I would add this in with whatever other oils you're using to work on cases where Lyme disease is one of the factors. Question is, well, why is it called Kunzea? Because it is named in honor of a German naturalist named Gustav Kunze. And I've never been a fan of calling a plant or a tree by the name of some person, because it makes no sense. It tells you nothing about the plant, especially since this particular naturalist really had nothing to do with the identification of the properties of this plant at all. So I go with the common name white cloud. I don't use Kunzea because it means nothing. It tells you nothing. And it's just some type of a vanity type of thing to take the name of a person and attach it to a plant or an animal. So it originally, Kunzea ambigua had a different genus name, Leptospermum, but it was still called ambiguum. And it was named by an English botanist named James Edward Smith. And it was called this because of its similarities to tea tree and other genera within the Myrtaceae or Myrtaceae family, myrtle family. And Leptospermum is the name of a genus of small trees and shrubs in the myrtle family. So it was referred to as Leptospermum because it's within the myrtle family. So ultimately, this is a type of myrtle. And so you may be thinking, well, can I combine it with other members of the myrtle family? Of course, they're related to each other. So you can think in those terms as well from a strictly botanical way of going about this. So let's go back to this ambigua, the name ambigua, the species name. So the species name ambigua derives from the Latin ambiguous, meaning doubtful or uncertain. So what can that tell you right away that, that you can use in terms of, well, who am I going to use this oil with on an emotional level? Well, the first thing you can tell you is there uncertainty? Is the person indecisive? Are they doubtful? Are they filled with doubt? Do they have a head full of doubt? Do they doubt themselves? Are they pessimistic? Is there has uncertainty been a quality in their life journey? And in terms of their early family, there was a lot of uncertainty. Father was in and out of work. They had to move around a lot. There were other issues that came up that led to, there was never this feeling of security. So insecurity may be another term that may work in here. But here's another word, another term. The Latin adjective ambiguum also means wandering and changing, which brings us back to this animal quality. But in the case of white cloud, this refers to the plant's hardiness and adaptability. This ambigua, this wandering and changing is why some people think of that is why ambiguum was attached to this particular plant. But you can think of this in terms of people who are always wondering, they're moving here, they're moving there, their relationships have short lifespan, they've been through various incarnations in their career, change careers, change majors in college. They have this wandering and changing quality to them. And all of this can be learned from the species name. But there's one other thing, and I'm not going to go into this today, but I'll just mention this real briefly. The two translations of the species name ambigua provide important clues regarding the inner nature of white cloud oil. Typologically, on a constitutional level, the white cloud person is naturally hardy and adaptable. The white cloud person is naturally hardy and adaptable. Now, this could apply to their younger years before disease and age have broken them down. So you may say, well, they don't seem hardy and adaptable now. Of course, they don't feel well, and they've gotten older and they've gotten compromised. So you don't see this quality. So this is the importance of taking a history, of knowing who this person is, where they've been, what they've done, what's their life been like. And you'll see that through their younger years, before age and unwellness has caught up with them, they were hardy and adaptable. That characterized their life journey. Yet sometimes they lapsed into feelings of uncertainty and ambiguity of feelings. Now, if you can knit these two together in a case, when you're looking at the case history, if you see that early on, the person was naturally hardy and adaptable, maybe still is, maybe even as this individual has gotten older, she or he has stayed relatively healthy, so they're still hardy and adaptable. But yet, they've been plagued by intermittent periods of uncertainty and ambiguity of their feelings. They didn't really know exactly what they felt or what decision to make or how to move on a specific issue, how to work their way through it, how to work out of it. Perhaps they were subject to suboptimal decision making because of this ambiguity of feelings, and made mistakes and got themselves into situations that were problematic. So white cloud oil I consider to be one of the leading oils for cases of ambiguous loss. So let's give you an example of ambiguous loss. A loss involving a relative who went missing years back and whose fate has never been determined, or a friend that you had a friend that you knew ever since you were a child, you were good friends and friends all the way through school and even in college and so forth. But then you had some type of a disagreement or set to and were angry with each other and went your separate ways, and you still miss that person after all these years because you were really close and so forth, and you have it's just left hanging out there. It's just unresolved. It's ambiguous loss. It's not like that person, you had close relationship and that person died somehow, and then the loss is, you grieve for the loss, but it's not ambiguous. Or another example of ambiguous loss is someone who's was given up at birth for adoption, and the person doesn't know who her birth parents are, and there's this sense of loss of the first family, ambiguous loss. Or a child goes off to war as a soldier, and there's battles and so on and so forth, and he's listed as missing and not dead. The body's never found. You don't know, was he taken prisoner? Is he still alive and he's still being kept in some secret prison somewhere in this country, this dangerous country? You don't know. So that type of loss can be referred to as ambiguous loss. You can't resolve your feelings about it. It just goes on and on. And this can go on for not only years, but decades. The rest of your life, really. You hear stories of this, that somebody who was lost in World War II, and through modern DNA technology now, 70, 80 years later, they were able to identify a few bones that they found out on the battlefield as being the person that this person has lost all those years back. And now there's resolution of the ambiguous loss. And the family is very grateful to finally have brought closure to that. So white cloud essential oil, let's get back here now to the oil, is distilled from the flowers, the leaves, and the fine twigs of the plant. Now, I don't get much in spiritual phytoessences into the chemistry of the plant. Aromatherapy that's one of the main features. I feel that there's some value to understanding that and knowing it, especially when you're treating illnesses on an acute level, to understand chemical components. But I feel just going off in that direction and making that your main focus is walking out onto the branch and forgetting about the roots. You don't know the plant, you only know something about an aspect of the plant, something that grows out of its inherent nature, not its nature itself, its inner soul nature. Just instead of the archetype, you're becoming completely consumed with the archetypal images, with the image of the archetype, something that tells you something about its archetype, not the archetype itself. And if you're working on an archetypal level with an individual, on a root level, you have to know who this plant is as a being, as a soul, not just what it does. So that's like if you have a particular job, well, you work as a teacher in an elementary school and teach sixth grade. Is that who you are? Or is that what you would do? Does that tell you something about yourself because you were drawn to that type of profession? Yes, but if you get just completely focused, well, let's hear how she teaches and what she does in class and how much time she spends on reading. You're just going off onto a tangent. You're moving farther away from who that person is. But nevertheless, white cloud essential oil is the only oil that contains 5 sesquiterpenes. And so sesquiterpene compounds exert strong anti-inflammatory actions. So other essential oils may contain 2 or 3 different sesquiterpene molecules. White cloud contains 5. So what is it? What does that highlight to you? This is a powerfully anti-inflammatory oil. And it lists in here what those, if that's important to you, what those sesquiterpenes are. These are the type of things I read and immediately forget because they're on paper. There's no need for me to remember that. The only thing I need to remember is anti-inflammatory. That's the one takeaway that I get out of that. Okay, moving down. Now, it's the 2 compounds that are mentioned in this paragraph, these 2 major constituents of the biochemistry of white cloud, the alpha pinene and the 1,8-cineol, are present in a larger percentage than the latter. Okay, so read that again. Another of white cloud's unique biochemical properties is that of its 2 major constituents, alpha pinene and 1,8-cineol, the former, the alpha pinene, is present in a larger percentage than the latter, the cineol. Most commonly, as in the case of eucalyptus, this balance of pinene and cineol is the opposite to the balance within white cloud oil. These 2 compounds are responsible for white cloud's value in treating respiratory problems, and this is going, or respiratory symptoms. This is going to become a major understanding of this oil. Its affinity for the lungs and respiratory system. But before we get onto that, let's take a look and just see what it's like on an emotional level. So I'm going to highlight this. So here are the noted symptoms on an emotional mental level that white cloud has been found to be useful for. Now, here is the caveat. Just because it has these general symptoms in its symptom picture doesn't mean that it's the go-to oil for every case of anxiety or every case of depression, only certain ones. Well, how do you know which ones? How do you know which ones it's relevant for? That's what we're going to find out. That's why it's important to know this in a broad, holistic way, rather than just try to symptom picture it. To remember, oh, this symptom, that symptom, this symptom, that symptom, which you're never going to remember. Nobody can retain 70 symptoms of one oil, and then you have 125 different oils in Spiritualis of Essential Oils, and they all have 70 symptoms. And if you do the math, that comes out to a lot of symptoms. Who's going to remember that? And why should you when it's already written down? What you do need to remember are the patterns. What's the pattern? What's the connection? How do you classify this from a pattern standpoint? So let's read the symptoms. And again, when you look at these symptoms, in this particular case, I'm looking at the emotionals and mentals. I'm looking at them as a group. Get a feeling for the oil from the group. I'm not looking at each one. Oh, nervous tension, got to remember that. No, I'm not doing that. I'm reading this like I'm reading a book, like a story. It's telling me a story of who this person is, the white cloud person. Nervous tension, stress-related emotions, anxiety, depression, mental exhaustion, mental sluggishness, brain fog, poor concentration. Beginning to get a feeling for who this person is in her failed state. So you're going to have a success state of the individual, hardy, adaptable. That will be the success state. Failed state, nervous, stressed, anxious, depressed, mentally exhausted and sluggish, unclear, they can't think straight, they can't concentrate anymore. Failed state. So if you know a person who's like this, you go, ooh, that sounds like, oh, Anna or George, that sounds like him or her. Should I use white cloud? Well, I don't know yet, because that could be linked to any number of reasons why they've moved into this particular failed state and presented with this particular group of symptoms. So we already know it's specific for inflammation. And this is one of the big takeaways on a physical level. Not only a physical level, but remember, virtually every disease in the body, including various types of diseases that affect mentation and emotions, such as dementia, like Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, are related to inflammation. So inflammation is a big factor in the development of Alzheimer's. This is why using anti-inflammatory substances, antioxidants, and various types of herbs and nutrients and so forth that are anti-inflammatory is one of the ways to make sure you don't develop dementia as you get older. But let's move on. The infections, bacterial, fungal, and viral. So this is a very broad spectrum. You can use it for bacterial infections. And again, we don't know, because I don't know if it's never been studied or it has been studied and somehow nobody's talked about it, whether it was effective or not in terms of Lyme disease. Remember, this is tick bush. Fungal infections, such as candida, and viral infections. Could it be useful in herpetic, like herpes zoster, shingles, or genital herpes? I don't know. It's not mentioned in the literature. It's something that you need to find out. But if it does have this general quality of across-the-board antimicrobial, it's worth experimenting with, at least as a support oil for those. But here are some that they do know. Staphylococcus aureus, including multiple antibiotic-resistant strains. This is great to know. You have a relative who's been in the hospital a long time, has got an infection. The antibiotics have been given a lot of antibiotics, and now they're developing skin disorders and other things which are now resistant to whatever antibiotics they've used. How does that happen? You use an antibiotic, or an antibiotic is prescribed, and I'm going to make these numbers up. This is just for illustration purposes. And let's say for illustration purposes, there's 1 billion of this particular type of bacteria that's causing a problem. And of those 1 billion, about 975 million were killed by the bacteria. But 25 million managed to escape the effect of the antibiotic. And what happens? Those are resistant. They're resistant to this antibiotic. Now they divide, they multiply, they reproduce, and they produce purely resistant strains. It's like selective breeding. And you use the same antibiotic against this very same bacteria, and it has no effect. And ultimately, with this particular type of cause and effect, the sequence, the medical doctors run out of antibiotics that have any value. And that's called antibiotic resistant or antibiotic resistant strains. So white cloud oil can prove useful against multiple antibiotic resistant strains. So you have this relative in the hospital, getting back to this scenario, and they have some type of a skin presentation that's really becoming a real problem. It's so uncomfortable. It's beginning to drain, abnormal suppuration, and so forth. Think of white cloud. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Escherichia coli, Candida albicans. These are some of the species that have been noted in terms of white cloud. And then it has all these other symptoms in here, which I'm not going to go through, but I do want to go through just one more thing. Here to here. full of these respiratories, colds and flu, nasal congestion, sinusitis, throat infection, inflamed respiratory passages, cough, asthma, bronchitis. It's basically running the board in terms of respiratory areas of, let's just say, areas of the respiratory system that are reaction areas that it's specific for. So if we say, well, which reaction areas is white cloud specific for? One of the major ones is going to be the respiratory system. The lungs and respiratory system is one of its major reaction areas where the oil will react. Now, you will see it in joints, rheumatoid arthritis, and it's in joints and so forth, but I'm not going into that today. I'm not discussing that here today. By the way, this here, I guess I didn't recall that. Shingles shows up, which is a herpes infection, herpes zoster. So that puts it under viral infections for herpes. But it does have a lot of skin symptoms as well. So you have, for instance, skin inflammation resulting from insect and spider bites, eczema, dermatitis, inflammation of the skin, rashes, shingles, dry skin, toenail fungal infection, burns of the skin, of course, bruises, bruising of the skin, insect bites of the skin, puncture wounds, acne, and rashes again. I guess that's a redundancy. So basically here again, what we have is another major reaction area. Skin, lungs. Why is that important? Well, first of all, they're both respiratory organs. The skin breathes just like the lungs. It respirates. There was that famous incident back in the 1960s with a James Bond movie. And they painted an actress for one of the scenes. I can't remember what the actual circumstances were, but they painted it with some type of a paint. I believe it was silver paint. I can't remember what it was. Covered her skin, and I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe she died because the pores of the skin were not able to respirate. So it was a type of suffocation. Something similar happened during the filming of The Wizard of Oz back in 1939. One of the original actors, Buddy Ebsen, was supposed to be, I believe, the Scarecrow. I can't remember. And he was, or maybe the Tin Man. Maybe it was the Tin Man. And he was also painted up in some way. And he ended up getting tremendously sick and had to be replaced by another actor. But in addition to this, in Chinese medicine, the lungs have this direct connection to the skin. They sort of rule the skin in some way. Now, the next paragraph goes into some of the anti-inflammatory properties, and I'm not going to cover that. So we're going to finish this particular section here. And then I'll do just a little bit more, and we're going to call that part one of this recording. On a deeper psychospiritual level, which is really where we're getting into the heart of the root of this person, of the white cloud person, the typology of the white cloud person. On a deeper psychospiritual level, white cloud is very comforting. Comforting would be yin. So it's yin. Despite all this yang quality, it has this yin, and this is the paradox of white cloud essential oil. It enhances inner strength, and this could be yin and yang, because, of course, strength could be very yang, but there's a passive type of strength, a yin chi type of strength, this condensing of the strength, this concentrating the strength would be yin. It rejuvenates the spirit of an ailing person, rejuvenates recovery power. Rejuvenation would be yin, but its spirit if it's rejuvenating the spirit and the person becomes enspirited and more enlivened, this is yin creating more yang, because now they're more enlivened, they're more active, they're more vivacious. Yang, outward. Yin is inward, yang is outward. So the yin effect, the inward effect of the white cloud on a deeper psychospiritual level creates the yang on the outer manifestation level and aids in the release of emotional pain. Pain in general is yang, and the release of it is a yang action. So here we have like healing like, yang healing yang. Robbie Zeck, ND, naturopath, author of The Blossoming Heart, writes that white cloud essential oil, quote, helps to diffuse deep emotional pain, bear that one in mind, that has grown solid. So what would growing solid be? Growing solid is yin. Condensing, yin is substance. It has become the emotional pain, which would be outwardly yang, has given rise, yang creating yin, to solidity, a type of physicality, a type of substance. The pain itself has become a type of substance. And why? It's as a result of suppression. So what's the difference between repression and suppression? Repression is when you hold things in yourself. You introvert your own emotions. That's repress. That's you. Suppression is someone other than you represses you, so to speak. Forces things inward, doesn't allow it to be expressed. So this brings into our long-term roots picture a history of suppression. Was this all going all the way back to childhood? Could be. Could have been in just a religion. They got into a religion that suppressed their individuality. Could it be that they got into a relationship where they were suppressed over a long period of time? Could be. Could it be all of the above? Yes, of course. So there's a lot of variation here. And this creates an internal block. A block, if you just look at the word, sounds like substance. Yin. A yang act created a yin substance, or made it substantial. The emotion's substance. And this block is in the body's meridian system. The body's meridian system. In other words, the acupoint channels. The flow of energy, according to the Chinese, moves along these channels in the body to the organ. So the lung meridian carries, is like railroad tracks that channels the vital force qi to the lungs. The heart meridian are the railroad tracks, the highway, the pathway that transfers vital force to the heart. Kidney meridian to the kidneys, liver meridian to the liver, and so forth. Is the meridian in the lungs the same thing? No, but they are connected. They're allied, they're affiliated. And so there is that overlap there. So by what we've seen so far, what do we know is one of the main meridians that will be blocked in this system? The lung meridian. The lungs. Oh, the lungs. So what does that tell us if we go back here? That tells us, let's go down here, go up a little bit again. That the nervous tension, the stress-related emotions, the anxiety, the depression, the mental exhaustion, The mental sluggishness, brain fog, and poor concentration are due, at least in part, to problems on the in respiration. They're not getting enough oxygen, or they're breathing shallowly, they're breathing rapidly, they're getting anxious. When a person becomes afraid, they start to breathe really fast. When they're really stressed out, they breathe shallowly and fast. The brain is only 6 pounds or so. It's a small part of your body, but it uses 20% of your daily oxygen intake. 20% goes to the brain of all the oxygen you take in every day. So if you don't get enough oxygen to the brain because of inhibition of the lung meridian and breathing, you're going to get mental exhaustion, you're going to get mental sluggishness, you're going to get brain fog, you're going to have poor concentration. The Chinese teach that qi, the vital force, comes in through 2 routes into the body. One is through food. You separate it in your gut from the food, and that qi is released from the plant or the animal from which that food derives. And the second is from the air. When you breathe in air, there's qi coming from the natural world, from the outer world, that you take into the body. You separate in the lungs, you separate that qi from the air, and it gets distributed to the body, in part by the lungs, which helps spread that qi. Once it takes it in, it helps spread it throughout the meridian system. So you have inhibition of the respiratory system and the lung meridian, then you're going to have a breakdown in that intake and distribution of qi all over the body, including the brain. So here, and this is where we're going to end part 1 of this particular recording, is now where you're seeing a demonstration of, first beginning with the doctrine of signatures picture, the plant morphology, the plant's habitat, combining that with the essential oil picture, symptom picture of that oil, combining that with some empirical observation in terms of its use on a deeper level. We're combining all that together, and we're beginning to understand who is white cloud. Who is white cloud essential oil? And by knowing that, you'll know who at least to some extent on an archetypal level is a white cloud individual. So here's where we're going to pick up with part 2. White cloud, yang, and qi. So I will see you again soon. Let's just stop this share. Here we are. So we will be back in part 2 with white cloud, yang, and qi.